Star Wars is one of the franchises we all have a soft spot for. We literally grew up with it. But there's one thing about this franchise that wasn't that well received. Yes, we're talking about the prequels, and it seems like we weren't the only ones having trouble swallowing it. In today's video, we'll be talking about how it took some time for even Ewan McGregor to make peace with him. So, what's the problem with the prequels? McGregor shared some pretty interesting thoughts with his fans while in conversations with GQ's Adam Badawi. The actor has been invited to GQ's Heroes 2022 event. Here, he was asked a bunch of interesting questions, but our favorite moment was definitely when he opened up about his feelings towards the prequels of the franchise. Now, we all know that some fans and Star Wars prequels have had a complicated relationship ever since they were released. Yes, the storyline kinda makes sense now and is starting to get some positive feedback, but earlier the films were used for one thing only, making memes. It seems like that was the only way for the disappointed fans to channel their frustration, and let's just say that they did a pretty good job at that. It would be an understatement to say that the prequels weren't enthusiastically embraced by everyone at the time of their release, which ended up being quite tricky for the actors and everyone else who had worked on them. We can imagine that this must have been quite hurtful for the creator George Lucas, who was going into some uncharted waters as prequels weren't really this common back then. But what was McGregor's reaction to all the critics? Well, we can imagine it was not wholly amazing. Ewan McGregor played Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Star Wars prequel trilogy, and we have to say, he did a fantastic job in that. Of course, he could do little about the dialogues, which were terribly written. McGregor voiced his opinion in the conversation, stating that all the criticism clouded his own judgment regarding the prequels. And can we really blame him for that? The Jedi ironically had little power over what came out of his mouth in the film, so we only have the writers to blame for that. Besides, it's pretty unfair that only the bad things got all the publicity. The plus points were hardly talked about. While talking to the audience, McGregor reminisced that seeing only the critical reviews made him feel like that was all there was to the prequels, but he doesn't feel like this anymore. As it turns out, Ewan has come around on the prequels, and he's found a way to love his old character, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's not because he made a long-awaited return to the character. So, let's see what changed his mind about the prequels. McGregor has admitted on different occasions that he was positively surprised to find out that the prequels weren't totally hated by everyone. While on press tours for the recent series Obi-Wan Kenobi, the actor managed to meet many people from the generation the prequels were actually made for, and it seems like the creators did a fantastic job of reaching their target audience. The thing is, those films were specifically made for the kids of the early 2000s, so that explains why they went over the heads of the critics. From what we understand, the critics were looking forward to films that would remind them of the good old days, make them feel young again. But sadly, it didn't work like that, and when that portion of the audience didn't get what they wanted, there was some serious backlash, and the effects of it lasted for quite some time. Moving on, McGregor kept the criticism close to his heart for years, but this isn't the case now. The prequels have finally gotten the reprisal McGregor thinks they deserve. This came after the recent Disney Plus project, Obi-Wan Kenobi. As McGregor reprised his role as the much-loved Jedi, he was able to see his early work through a completely different lens. According to the actor, he's now able to understand that the films were received differently by a range of audiences, and the people for whom the films were actually made ended up loving it. The only reason why he wasn't able to hear their opinions was because they were kids at the time. Now that they are grown adults, the fans have the ability to tell McGregor about their opinions. Well, that must be enough vindication for the creators, don't you think? Because isn't that exactly what you want whenever you're creating something? The fact that it spoke to an entire generation is all that should matter. Yeah, the prequels weren't perfect, but they're a part of pop culture forever. And if you ask us, we think they've aged really well. Yes, even the somewhat campy parts. So what did McGregor have to say about George Lucas? The Obi-Wan Kenobi had nothing but praise for the legend George Lucas, and we get it completely. George is a genius. Seriously, how do you build a world this engrossing from scratch? He praised him for having a different idea when everyone was opting for mainstream plots. It was cool of him to try something different, and it's alright if it wasn't very well received. Like we said earlier, the voice of their main target audience didn't even reach them at that point. We're sure that if he looks back on those films now, he won't regret a single thing. McGregor also thinks that taking such a step in that era was a very ballsy and interesting move. So yeah, we've got to give him credit for that. Now, this different reception from the fans must have been enthusiastically welcomed by the actor. Yes, indeed. We can only imagine how satisfying it must have been for McGregor to finally hear some positive feedback regarding his work, which he probably thought was a lost cause. We wouldn't be surprised if he said he tried to forget the entire experience. So it's really great that we got to see him play his role again, and all the positive reception helped him step back into the iconic character. We're sure he started filming with new energy with all the positive comments swimming in his head. Now that he's finally heard some good things about his earlier work in the franchise, he can definitely let out a sigh of relief. And good for us that we actually saw a return. It makes us so happy that the harsh critics didn't scare him away. If you haven't watched the new series already, please give it a try right now. We promise you, it'll be completely worth your time. Both Hayden Christensen and McGregor give fantastic performances, and you'll leave the show loving their characters more than ever. So the initial reception wasn't exactly what he wanted, but that didn't stop McGregor from rewatching them. Now, before returning to our screens as Anakin Skywalker's mentor, McGregor had some research to do. Of course, the actor didn't want to walk on set fully unprepared, so as it turns out, he had to watch the prequels again. Well, that must have been pretty hard for the actor, but with utter determination, he managed to sit through them. Yikes, that must have brought back some pretty harsh memories. And as expected, it was somewhat hard for them. Many actors have said that it's not really fun to see themselves act in something, and they usually avoid watching their work. Plus, the good ones are always very harsh critics on themselves. The actor wasn't really able to watch them in one go, but thankfully he made it through. And finally, how was the reception to Obi-Wan Kenobi? Well, the reception to this new Disney Plus show was mostly positive. Many believe that it added more depth to beloved characters such as Anakin Skywalker and Kenobi, and was just a great addition to the Star Wars series. One fan said that they had been pretty disappointed by the content the franchise had been putting out lately, but Obi-Wan Kenobi changed all that, and they can't wait to see what's next. Another said that Hayden Christensen was the best thing about the prequels, and seeing him reprise his role was a treat to see. And they added that Obi-Wan finally got the dialogue and complexity he deserved, and McGregor did a fantastic job. One Twitter user claimed that this movie just made them see the prequels and the recent movies in a different light, and now they can't wait to rewatch them once again. Still, there were some who were sort of lukewarm on the series. One critic claimed that while the series had good intentions, it kinda fell flat because it didn't possess the comedy and campiness that makes the Star Wars franchise so charming. Another echoed this statement and said that while the acting was fantastic, the show just took itself a bit too seriously, and that was its downfall. That's a wrap for this video, guys. What was your opinion on the Star Wars prequel trilogy? Did you like them, or did you think that they were a waste of time? And how do you feel about Obi-Wan Kenobi? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more awesome videos like this.